So welcome to another Creative Spin podcast. Once again with the amazing, the gorgeous, the one and only, the... Hi Anna, how's it going?
I'm okay. How are you?
It's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has.
You know?
Yeah.
Poor Colin has been, coming on into the podcast.
He's
and
doing a great job.
putting up with me and all of that. And
Yeah.
you've just been...
I needed a break.
You need that traumatizing, eh? Okay.
No,
for those of
just
you,
busy.
for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube and are you're just listening to us, well, we have a special guest here again. Popular demand, Loki.
Who's half asleep?
He's kind of stoned out here on the chair, but he likes being with us. So whenever we do our home studio episodes of the Creative Spin podcast, he's
a special guest.
Yeah, he's like the special guest of this podcast. So in today's podcast, I thought we would be discussing an interesting topic and something that's really dear to us or that we've been traumatized with in the past a little bit, which is having an accent. Just because English might not be your first language, or you just think you have a funny accent when you're speaking any language. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we went through, our perspectives on that, and should that be the defining point as to if you should or shouldn't do videos, or should or shouldn't do podcasts. So let's discuss this. I think it's going to be an interesting one. You guys stay tuned. Boo! Today's podcast is brought to you by Workplace One, a company offering boutique private offices, co-working spaces, and virtual office solutions, as well as meeting rooms in the best neighborhoods of Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo. Ideal for entrepreneurs, companies, and passionate business people. Workplace One is where you want to be with your business. For more information, go over to workplaceone.com. This is where it goes into the thing.
I'm not that slow.
Yeah, just explaining step by step.
Yeah, of course.
And we're back. So, accents. How do you feel about that one?
Well, I have one. So I
Don't
feel
we all?
great.
You know what? And that's the other thing. I think there's a huge misconception here when it comes to accents. I think everybody
Everyone
has their
an
own accent,
Yes,
right?
I believe so. But there are, this is what I call, there's a certain standard accent to a place where you live. And what I'm trying to say is, if you go to New York, you know who is a New Yorker. If you come to Toronto, you know who is a Toronto person, right?
Okay.
And then I am outside.
No, but you know what? Now I think what we're getting to is, if it's English, I think the people or the English language that doesn't have much of an accent is probably the one you listen to or watch on TV or radio. I think when it comes to those media outlets, there's always been a.
But with English, what I find funny is because there are, due to, especially in Canada, right, due to the number of cultures that have come to make up the Canadian mosaic, I think that here an English accent is very hard to... A standard English, let's just put a standard English accent is really hard to define because we all have these, some more than others. Everyone seems to have a bit of an accent.
True, but when it comes to media, this is where I'm getting to. When it comes to media, I think there was this standard English or French or whatever country we're talking about, that, in the media, you had to kind of, I guess where they came from was everybody had to understand you because, you're talking about either news or something important.
It needs to send a message.
Everybody had to understand you. So that's why they tried to get away from accents and all of that. But now I'm finding that a lot of times you're listening to people on TV and radio and everywhere, they're very proud of their accent and they're okay with that.
Yeah.
And I honestly, unless it's an accent, let's say, we're speaking in English, so if it's a really difficult English accent to understand, then it might not be the best choice, right?
There are some ways of going around it, but and I've read a lot of theories and a lot of studies, and because I do have an interest, and a lot of times people say, well, you can perfect it this way or that way. Yes and no. That depends on the person, right? It doesn't matter how much I try to perfect mine into not sound a certain way. I'm 44. You know, it's proven that after you're about 13 or 14, it's
14
very
is
hard to become a native, what they call sound like a native person. So, but in my case, I always laugh because so I didn't have, I don't have siblings, so I didn't have anyone to practice English with. Because when I went to Portugal as a 5-year-old, my parents always spoke Portuguese to me because they didn't speak English. But I had learned, like most kids do, watching TV. I could go by and speak English, right? Kindergarten
Good
English.
old Sesame Street.
Kindergarten English, right? But because I went to a place where no one spoke English, I had no siblings so that I could practice the language, I guess. And school did not offer English until I got to grade 7 for me. So in grade 5 and 6, we were introduced to the hi, how are you? Nothing more than that. And then grade 7, a little bit more. But I had a teacher that felt like you had to learn how to read and write, but not understand what you were saying, because that would come
amazing.
after, right?
That's amazing.
Anyway, so
Why understand what you're
grade
saying?
9, I come to Canada, and I'm a Canadian, born in Toronto, who spoke no English whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I had started looking at English in a different way, and that was my passion for U2. So,
oh boy, here we go. U2.
But this is important because I love U2 so much. I always, since the age of 10, that I've loved U2.
Here we go. This is going to be an hour podcast.
No, it won't. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what they were singing. So I began translating their lyrics, and then I began listening to interviews and all of that. So I came to Canada pronouncing words a little bit like Bono does, right? Ugly instead of ugly.
So you had the Irish, that Irish side to you.
And studying French at the same time. So that was for
But
me
it's interesting
the
you're
mix.
saying studying French as well, because a lot of people that don't know your background,
They think I'm French-Canadian.
You're French Canadian because of your accent, which
Yeah.
is interesting. But this whole conversation about accents, we're talking up until now. We were talking about how you survive in the world and all of that, and I want to bring it in a little bit more towards creators, right?
Yeah.
And when you start doing videos, or when you start thinking about doing videos, a lot of people think about right away, if you're living in Canada or the States or wherever that English is your main language, you want to start doing your videos in English, but you might have that little bug in the back of your mind saying, you know what, that's not your first language. You're going to screw up. Words aren't going to sound right. You're not going to be able to explain yourself properly. And I'm saying all of this because I have felt all of this before. And you know this very well. When I started doing the videos, it was one of the biggest things. And I even discussed it with you saying, why don't I just do it in Portuguese? And you're like, well, you're living in Canada.
You're limiting yourself.
You're just limiting yourself. And now, funny enough, I've been debating about doing the same videos and the same topics that we've done in English in Portuguese as well. But now I'm thinking about it differently. I'm not thinking about it just doing it in Portuguese, but also probably giving it like a second view on that on the topic in another language, which is always interesting because there are more markets and more people that can get access to your videos and to your information. But going back to those fears, and they're real.
Oh, I felt them going to university afterwards.
They're real. Like,
they are.
In university, probably when you had to stand in front of people and give your,
because that's
your
your
speeches
media
and all of that.
That's your media, right? And again, going through high school, I had a lot of support from really good friends. Nelia was, and she knows we're still really good friends. Nelia was the one that made me welcome, and because she spoke Portuguese, she'd translate, she'd speak Portuguese to me and help me. But I always had that. But in high school, I did well because I had done curriculum was so advanced in Portugal that most of the things I was doing in high school here I had done in Portugal up to grade 8.
Now going back to the video stuff, and when I started, I was
Similar.
afraid.
It was similar to you.
And
Right?
every single time that the camera would go on, I would overthink everything that I wanted to say. And that became an issue. And, it would be start recording and then get stuck halfway through. And then the other thing is you have to start realizing that everybody stumbles when they speak. Even
Yeah,
if you're,
that's normal.
even if, let's say English is your first language and you don't know any other language and that's your only, you're going to stumble.
You can be very eloquent. You will always stumble. That's just
Because
the way
it's
human brain
yeah,
works.
it's the way our brain works. And I think that a lot of times, and with a lot of our clients here at Creative 7, we when we're recording with them, one of the first things that I try to do is to get them to be comfortable in front of the camera, because I know they're overthinking everything. They're overthinking the way they're sitting, the way they're. Would you do that if you're sitting at a coffee shop having that same conversation about, that same topic to me? No, you wouldn't. You would be relaxed. You would just be talking. You would make mistakes. You'd probably look at your phone. You're doing a million things at the same time, but
And
yet
it's
the conversation is flowing and going. While a camera goes on and boop, all
It's
of a sudden,
intimidating.
yeah, and it's hard. And with our podcast, I've also started doing another thing, which is I always try to have a coffee and just before the podcast with
Where's
our
my
guests.
coffee?
Actually, we are missing coffee, man. I was thinking about that. We need to
Gee,
go
I
get
feel
one.
left
We
out.
should cut and go for coffee. No. But I usually have a coffee with my guests so that they get comfortable and they get into the conversation. And then when we start recording, I just continue the conversation. Then I go back to the first topics
Yeah.
that we had spoken
And
about.
you feel a bit at ease, or at least a little bit more at
They
ease.
do, and they
Yeah.
tell me this,
Yeah.
and I'm now feeling a lot more at ease than I was when I go back and look at the first videos
True.
that we did. I was here we go. I was overthinking it because English isn't my first language. What if I say something stupid? What if I what ifs,
Yeah.
and that can actually intimidate somebody so much that they won't actually do anything.
I think that being confident is the word. It's not because you have an accent or because you may not know a certain word. I think
Get it
if
done.
you are genuine and like that's the
If
thing.
you have a message to put out there to the world,
yeah, be confident.
get
be
the message
yourself,
out. Don't worry
and-
about
and
what people
it's-
might think or what
yeah.
you may stumble. You know what?
Yeah,
The
no,
more
it's-
I think if you make mistakes and if you keep on people that are watching you, they're gonna get the sense that you're being natural
Yeah.
about yourself and about the message you're putting out. So they're gonna actually continue to watch.
But in your case, it's interesting because you lived in Portugal until you were 19, but you
Yeah.
had a sister that spoke English to you, and you had neighbors that spoke
Yeah,
English
my
to you,
neighbors,
right?
Massachusetts,
Right.
Scotland. I mean, we had
So you had
a lot
see, you had different English accents.
Yeah, but it was
going
still
on at the
English.
same time, right? But
But listen, when I got back here, I was came back
Mm-hmm.
here. I was 19, and I knew quite a
You
bit of
spoke
English. I
English.
spoke
No, you
English
spoke
quite
English.
well, but I was afraid to speak
Yeah,
because
because it's different,
I wasn't used to the rhythm of
Yeah.
the language. Like when
because
you're
you
here.
were no longer thinking in English, right?
Yeah, I was kind of translating already. My head it was a fast translation,
Yeah.
but it was still translating from Portuguese to English, and that's why a lot of the stuff that I was saying it wasn't that it was wrong, it was just not proper.
You're overthinking it.
I was overthinking it. But then again, you learn and you keep
do.
on going. And when it coming back to the videos, the more you do, the more you record your videos, the easier it's going to get and the better you're going to get at that. So my advice today is really when it comes to if you have an accent, if you don't feel too comfortable, don't worry about it. Just keep on doing it. Keep recording yourself. Keep putting the message out, and you're going to get better.
Yeah.
And your message is just going to come out.
Yeah, and don't if anyone tells you, oh, you shouldn't because you have don't listen to that.
Yeah.
Listen to that professor that said it indicates you know more than one language. You should always be positive about it.
All right. And now we are going to say ciao, até amanhã, au revoir,
À la prochaine.
à la prochaine. We're gonna throw in as many languages in here as we can. Thank you, Anna, for being in this
My
podcast.
pleasure.
It was really, really nice to have you. Have Loki here.
He's
Loki,
sleeping.
you're sleeping,
He's
dude.
sleeping.
What's going on? Yeah, and hopefully we can do a couple of more
Sure.
podcasts.
It'll be my pleasure.
You know, because I don't want to keep on bugging Colin. I mean, Colin. We'll get.
But
Colin
I do
in
want a
here.
coffee next
You
time.
know what? We were actually debating this, me and Colin, the other day. Is that we just had our 30th episode, and we said every 10th episode we would do like an episode all together. We missed that one, so on the 40th episode.
Oh, by myself included? Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
you have to be
Oh,
included, but we
I
were
see.
so selfish and so like.
I see how it works.
Yeah,
Colin, I'm going to have a word with you too.
listen, I don't want to blame anybody, but Colin just said, I mean, you know what, Anna's not here, so we'll just do it. And I don't know, it's too bad he's not here to agree with his statement and say yes and say sorry to you and all of
Bien
that.
sûr.
All right, I'm gonna cut this.
Bye.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, bye.
Later, guys.
I
Catch
need
you
a
on the
coffee
next one.
next time.
Bye. Bye.